bass layering. What's up, dogs? It's Cameron with Venus Theory, and in today's video, we're here to talk about how I combine bass sounds to make one kind of big bass out of multiple bass parts. This is something I avoided doing for quite some time. I always kind of wanted to make one bass patch and kind of work with that. But over the last couple of years, my approach has definitely started to change, where I'm using different basses to form different elements of a single thing and then combining those things together. And I always found the process of squishing them together was the hardest part. So in today's video, I just wanted to show you how I did this in a new track we're working on, as well as just kind of talk about some tips and tricks along the way. So let's dive in and get started. Alright guys, so in this video I wanted to go over layering bass sounds and how I approach it, why I do it, and how to get them to kind of sit together rather than just sound like two separate basses. So we're going to take a listen to the drop of this song. This is a new song we're working on. This is still quite a bit of work to be done. It doesn't sound super great at the moment. So just bear that in mind before listening. So we're going to go ahead and listen right now. 3, 2, 1. So that is the big bass sound that I have concocted for this song. So when I started out programming a patch, I was kind of trying to get one Reese that had this kind of like movement, but also had this kind of like FME metallic texture, but also had a lot of low end and also had a crispy high end. And, you know, that's just like not something I'm smart enough to know how to do just offhand. So we're going to walk through these layers one at a time and then talk about how I combined them to make one kind of unified bass sound. So let's start things off nice and simple here. So this is my sub and it sounds like this. So really nothing fancy. This is a sine and a saw with a low pass filter, and that's it. So nothing really crazy. I use the maximizer. This is a Cubase default stock plugin with soft clipping on. Maximizer is kind of like a compressor and kind of like a limiter, but it's not. Basically what maximizer is doing is it's just squeezing a sound to get a consistent level. If it's quiet, it turns it up. If it's loud, it turns it down. That kind of thing. And soft clipping just enables soft clipping. And then after that, I've added a soft clipper. So this just generates some extra harmonics so that the sub really poked through in the mix. Without these two inserts, sounds like this. So it's, you know, it's decent. It just doesn't quite have that growl to it. So with these, it jumps out quite a bit more. It's not quite focused in on the super low end. So, you know, all things considered, I could maybe cut out some of the saw and let it really focus on the low end, but I haven't really decided yet because, as I mentioned, this is still kind of in the earlier stages of this song. So now, on to the movement and modulated part. That sounds like this. So, like I said, my goal here was to create one consistent bass, and this, I'm not really going to talk about how these sounds were made. One of them is just a preset from SynthMaster. One of them is another SynthMaster. I just made something in it. I made this one, I think. Yeah, the crispy one. So nothing really difficult, just make your bass sounds. So what I was looking for is, like I said, I wanted one layer that was very kind of modulated and metallic, which was this preset one. but I wanted that to have kind of that crispy high end. So I put both of these bass sounds, and then came the challenge of combining them. So if I disable all of my inserts here, you'll see what I mean. So these are the bass sounds completely raw. This is the preset kind of FME thing. And then this is the little crispy guy. And you'll hear, if I allow these two into the group here, and we're going to go over that in a minute, this is what they sound like together. So they do kind of naturally work because, like I said, what I was doing is kind of compensating for an element I didn't like with the extra layer, which is pretty much what layering is all about, is, you know, combining things to make up for deficiencies of one single sound that you couldn't do otherwise. So I added my processing to my basses. Not really anything special. Multiband compressor, kind of used a lot like People and Ableton do, where they use the multiband dynamics to kind of EQ the sound and squish the high end really hard and stuff like that. Kilohertz Snap Heap. If you don't have this, you need to go get it. All the Kilohertz plugins are incredible. Frequency Shifter. So this is something I picked up from a tutorial by somebody somewhere. I'll show you what this does really quick. So what I've done is 2 frequency shifters. This is serial, so it goes this, then into this, then out. I mix this in pretty low, but it's kind of a cool thing. It adds a little bit of movement. Which you can hear there. It's almost like a flanger or a phaser in a way. After this, I've added DAWg. This is a Cubase stock plugin. Just really good tube saturation. Magneto 2, this is another Cubase stock plugin. Use this to kind of distort kind of some of the more aggressive, barky frequencies from about here to about 4K. So 150 to 5K. That's what I did. And then you can see I've driven it quite hard. After that, frequency, this is just an EQ. I wanted to gut out some of the sub because I already have a sub layer, and I just wanted to kind of give it that really resonant, boxy feel because of that metallic-y, FME stuff going on. This EQ really brings that out, which you'll hear here. So it's a subtle lift, that frequency, and this isn't really a mixing EQ so much as it is just a sound design EQ, if that makes sense. So I just kind of gave it some resonance there. The other bass here, same kind of thing, multiband dynamics, DAWg, Magneto, and frequency. This one I just lifted up the high end. I also had Snap Heap here with the frequency shifter, but I found 2 of those gave it a little too much movement where it kind of got weird. So that takes this bass sound from this to this. So you can hear really focusing in on the high end because that's really all I want from this. But I do need kind of the mid-range and stuff to help fill out the movement of the bass. So after my sounds are ready, what I did is create a group. You can do this by right-clicking over here and selecting Add Group Track. So in my mixer, what I've done is send these to the Reese group. So this is the output. This would normally go to stereo out, which is your output bus. The SC you see here is my side chain, so all these elements are being side chained with one of the side chains. So in this case, these send to this group. This group then goes to the side chain. So this is side chain to the kick and snare, as your basses usually are. So the Reese group, this is where the challenge was, because right now, they do kind of work together, but you can still kind of distinctly hear the 2 elements. So to combine these, some of my favorite ways to go about this are with saturation, modulation, and compression, which is really all I've done here. So FabFilter Saturn, this is warm tape. I believe this is just the default. It's a great sound, and just gave this about 50% drive. And this kind of saturation adds harmonics. So it's a great tool for combining things because it helps to generate more harmonics for the overall content, which helps things kind of sound a little more glued together. So that's with it and without.
It's very subtle, but you can kind of hear especially the mid-range seems to glue together a bit more. After that, I've added Isotope Trash 2 with the classic overdrive preset and mixed it in about halfway. This is really the magic of combining basses, and I use Trash a lot for this purpose. So this is before. But with Trash, so it does give it a bit of a level lift as well, which is fine because I just compensated for that later with the input gain control on the channel settings here, but whatever, we're not talking about that. So I don't really know what Trash 2 does. It destroys everything or works really, really wonderfully in very subtle ways. And in this case, the little overdrive preset here, classic overdrive under subtle, is a great tool for kind of squeezing things together. So after this, this is sounding a lot more like one bass patch, but I added some modulation here. These are just the default phaser and flanger. Cubase plugins settings aren't really important, but I just added a bit of modulation so that both the basses get this same movement. And that is really where the magic of this was, because there you can still kind of make out that it's two separate sounds, but when they're both having that same modulation applied, it sounds a lot more like a single sound. After this, frequency, this was not really a mixing EQ. This was more kind of fix-it EQ, so just a boost around here, cut around 500, and took off some of the top end because it was getting a little much. So after that, H-Comp Stereo. H-Comp from Waves is an amazing compressor, and you really need to go get it if you don't have it. Just drove the output. This is something you've probably seen me do many, many times. And this just adds a bit of soft clipping, but it's also compressing the sound quite a bit because it's very loud. And that really glued the sound together. So I guess to cap this off and to demonstrate, if I had just left these two patches alone, they would sound like this. And, you know, you really can't make that out. And if I had just applied the effects to each individual bass and not the group, you would get this. But with all that stuff and, you know, with working to kind of combine these, and using that separate sub-layer as well was really important. So you can hear that sub really helps to kind of glue the low end together. But that is my little lecture on combining bass sounds.
And that's it for this video, guys. So thanks for watching, and I hope you learned something. As always, be sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys again soon.